In these days, Jesus has been teaching us Christian virtues that enable us to become worthy sons and daughters of the Lord. 2 days ago, he taught us about taking responsibility for our actions. Yesterday, he spoke to us about humility and service. And today, Jesus gives us a very important lesson with regards to how we can control our desires and especially how we can tackle greed. Now we see that desires are part of every human life, and therefore we come across situations where sometimes greed gets the better of us. And today Jesus gives us a technique of dealing with this situation. How can we deal with this? Well, we shall find that out in today's part of Tea Time with the Word. But before we move to today's reflection, let us take a look at the readings of the day. Today's first reading is from the prophet Jeremiah, chapter 18, verses 18 to 20. And today's gospel is from the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 20, verses 17 to 28. And today, being the Wednesday of the second week of Lent, the gospel tells us how we can overcome greed in our lives. Now we see that there is an amusing side to today's gospel reading. We see that the ambitious sons of Zebedee approach Jesus along with their mother in the hopes of being granted a place of honor in his kingdom. Now, Jesus asked them a question: are you able to drink of the chalice that I am to drink? And enthusiastically they reply, we are able. So far, so good. But then comes the funny part. Jesus congratulates them on being able to embrace the chalice that he is going to drink. But he informs them that the place of honor is not his to give. Now we can probably imagine how James and John were feeling at this moment. They were willing to sacrifice. They were willing to take whatever it took in order to follow Jesus. But it came at a cost. They wanted some place of authority in the kingdom. And therefore probably we can see that they too would have been disappointed to a certain extent. They were willing to sacrifice and do whatever it takes, even suffer along with Jesus. But probably they were disillusioned when they realized that they weren't promised anything in return. And in this passage, one clearly sees Christianity's inversion of pagan values. Now, Jesus calls out the Gentiles' approach to lordship, and in its place, he establishes the central paradigm of humility, which we also saw in the readings of yesterday. Now, to be very clear, Christianity doesn't just take the pagan ethics and add some icing or some decoration on it. On the contrary, Jesus inverts the pagan values. He transforms pagan virtues, and he offers us a radically new perspective on what it means to be fully human. Now, we see that for Jesus, humanity and the good of humanity was the central aspect. And that is what that separated Jesus from the scribes and the Pharisees. Jesus was more human. Jesus was concerned about the well-being of the people. And therefore, in a world where moral and social decline is constant, where this moral and social decline threatens to engulf our contemporary culture, it is not difficult to see that when we begin to neglect this gospel vision, there is chaos all around. And therefore, Jesus emphasizes the fact that we need to give stress and we need to place emphasis on this attitude of service towards others. Now, in today's gospel passage, we see that James and John and their mother, they represent the people of today's world with their never-ending desires and also greed to a certain extent. We see that sometimes our desires tend to be covered by greed. In general, we see that desires are good, but what makes us greedy is our need to be first, our desire to be first. And if we allow greed to take root in us, then we will go along with today's world. We will be taken up in the flow of the world, and thus greed will be something that governs us. But we see that Jesus helps us by giving us a solution to avoid going along with today's world. Jesus gives us a solution how we can tackle this problem of greed and desires in our daily lives. Now, what is this solution? Well, we see that Jesus instructs us to shift our desire and focus from holding powers to serving others, from being self-centered to being others-centered. And this shift is not very easy. It may be easy to speak, it may be easy to tell others. But when it comes to self, we see that it is not easy to give up oneself and reach out to others. But in order that we serve others, Jesus invites us to be humble and even willing to become a slave who is always at the service of others. And probably we see that Jesus must have learned this solution to human greed from his mother when he was in the womb. Now we all know the story of Mary. Mary had the privilege of being the mother of God. She was told by the angel that she was to be the mother of God. Now she could have taken a back seat, relaxed and prepared herself. But when she realized that her cousin Elizabeth was in her 6th month, she decided to take the long journey to go to Elizabeth and be at the service of Elizabeth. And this virtue of humility is what set out Mary and which will set us out if we follow it. Yes, this is what Jesus invites us to do. And Mary makes a shift from the privilege of being the mother of God to being at the service of Elizabeth. It only means that as ardent followers of Jesus, we are also called to imitate him in all that we do. We should be doers of good things and not always recipients of things done to us. And therefore, let us get rid of any greed that we may have. Let us get rid of any desire of self-centeredness that we may have, and let us decide in this Lenten season to be at service of others, to serve others, especially when they require our help. And in a way, we can probably ask ourselves this question: do I at times compromise or downplay my Christian faith out of a desire to be liked or a fear of becoming shunned? If so, how can I become more courageous and more counterworldly in the way I live out the gospel? And as we reflect on the readings of the day, let us ask the Lord for this gift of humility and this desire to serve others, so that we can convert our self-centeredness into other-centeredness and be at service of others, doing and imitating Christ in all that we do. Amen.